And if you're just joining us now, let's bring you up to date with the scenes that we've been witnessing in Cairo, in Tahrir Square, over the past 25 minutes or so. The police, riot police, stepping in to disperse the crowds who've been holding a sit-in for the past 2 days. There have been some injuries. The police were using batons to disperse the crowds, using rubber bullets as well. Our correspondents on the ground have been bringing us constant updates. We can return now to Shireen Tadros. Shireen, I understand there is more happening behind you. Bring us up to date.
Yes, just in the last seconds, the protesters who were driven right out of the square have been coming back in their hundreds back into the square. I'm going to move out the way because this is really something you should see. As they're moving back in, the police are also moving back in. They're firing tear gas at them at an incredible rate. They're also beating them as they're approaching the main square, which you can see now. The roundabout, in fact, is pretty much on fire because the police had set on fire all the tents that were there. So people are flooding back into the square. Protesters, they're shouting Allahu Akbar, God is great, as they're coming back in, and they are being met with rounds of tear gas. This has been continuing for the last few minutes now. They're setting fire as well to anything they can set fire to. And the police, once again, find themselves completely outnumbered in the main square.
And you sense there has been a shift, a change in tactics, at least in the last few minutes, on the part of the police, taking maybe a step back while the crowds are able to gather once again. Have they essentially stepped back?
Yes, I mean, they were chased out to begin with from different exits, and it seems what happened is that they then congregated themselves all at one of the exits, which was the one right next to the Egyptian Museum, and now they're all coming flooding back in from that one. What happened was the police, after they tried to chase the protesters away, they actually had to go into the streets and the side streets around Tahrir so that they can chase the rest of the protesters out of the area. And as soon as they started to leave that main square, their number of police went down. That is when the thousands of protesters started flooding back in. So right now you have a complete battle on your hands. You have police, military police, and protesters all in the same area, all in Tahrir Square.
A very tense situation indeed in Cairo. Any indication as to what the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces has in mind to bring the situation under control? Have there been any statements from the leadership?
The only thing we've heard from the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces is from the spokesperson, who actually spoke to 2 private Egyptian television channels late last night, and what he was saying to them is essentially that the young people here don't quite know what they're doing. There's no strategy. There are foreign hands involved. It was a very Mubarak era-esque type of speech that he was giving to people, and that did not play well here. People are waiting to have some kind of leadership, and there is no leadership, some kind of concessions, and there certainly aren't any concessions. So there was definitely a vibe around the whole of the day when people were thinking, what is the Supreme Council going to do next? But all we were being faced with is more and more statements that are incredibly hardline. So apart from the vehicles that we're seeing, we're also seeing motorcycles as well being driven around. Those motorcycles actually belong to the protesters, not the police. So people are coming back not just on foot but also with their motorcycles, adding really just to the complete chaos that we're seeing behind us. But it's very difficult to see through all the smoke and smog here. But I can tell you that it does seem that the protesters are winning over the police, if you like. They are the ones that are pushing the police back at the moment, rather than the other way, which was the case just about 15 minutes ago.
It certainly looks that way, Shireen, and as we spoke about half an hour ago, the protesters seem to be quite a bit outnumbered by the number of riot police who were chasing them out of the square. Now the protesters seem to be back in large numbers. What would be your best estimate as to the numbers of people gathered today and those who were there yesterday?
Well, you know, this has been a very long process. In the morning, on Saturday morning, what we saw was probably about 250 people who were gathered. They were the ones that were forcibly removed by the police. After that, after the clashes started taking place, by around the afternoon, we saw thousands of people gathering, and by the evening there was certainly 1,000-2,000 people in Tahrir Square. Now, throughout the course of the morning, more and more people have been joining, and we really now are back to that number, back to 2,000-3,000 people maybe who are now in Tahrir Square. They were chased out, as we were talking about just as we were coming on air now about half an hour ago, but now that really making their way back and waving their flags, chanting. They're saying we want an end to military rule. They're saying God is great, and really trying to show the military police here that they are not going to be driven out. This is a very important message, if you like, to the military council and to the police at this stage, because in the previous months that we've seen protests here, every time the police have driven out these protesters, that's been the end of it. They've essentially secured the area, and that's been the end of the story. People haven't come back, but we haven't quite seen this scene before, where people are driven out and then they come back in, and I think that's because of the sheer number of protesters. The police haven't tried to clear this number of protesters from Tahrir, really, in the last 10 months at all. And again, the protesters are almost acting now as if nothing happened. They're coming back, holding up their flags. They're circling the main area in the middle. They're surveying the damage because, of course, all those tents were set on fire by the police. They're putting the fires out in the middle, and they're regrouping, essentially.
They seem to be regrouping, and just by the sheer number of protesters that are growing by the minute, it would seem, and we certainly are seeing that on our screens right now, Shireen, people flooding presumably into Tahrir Square. And from the statements you've heard, from the comments that have been made to you by protesters, you spoke to someone just about a half hour ago, there seems to be quite a bit of resilience and determination on the part of Egyptians.